as my lips uttered in flat. As I'm looking at a piece of paper that I wrote in 1984, what were the early ideas about the shape of the earth? I had not even opened my Bible up about it yet. That's why a lot of people don't understand. How is Rick Hummer connected to so many of these people? How does he know this person? How does he know that person? He doesn't have a YouTube channel. He's not really active on social media. It's God's plan. All I do is call a couple people and start asking questions. Rob Baxter's back here, call him Crash. Robbie Davidson. Mike Todd came all the way from, dude, your story right now is incredible. Mike Todd came here. He's been running around here helping out. They had technical difficulties this morning, and that's what I'm going to tell you. My entire presentation was shot today. I had video, I had an outline, I had a PowerPoint, I had a couple visuals. I left it all home. Told Mike when I came in and saw him, I said, he goes, what do you got? I go, nothing. No visuals? No. Oh wait, YouTube video. Pull that up. This is all off the cuff. This is not planned. But we prayed. And we tested the spirits behind all this today. And God answers. So, why do I believe that? Why do I believe that if we test things, that we should be proven things? Tested and proven. Why do I believe this? Because in 1974, when I was probably almost too young to remember things, I dreamed of a serpent hunting me along the creek bank in front of my house on Pine Road, North Liberty, Indiana. That dream happened over and over and over again. 1974, I woke up in the middle of my yard with a bright light that flashed over my head. I was sleepwalking, from what I know. Went back inside the house and went to bed. I was scared that I was going to get in trouble for being outside. A little kid. Next morning, my mom asked me, what were you doing last night? My feet were all muddy. Probably from walking in the wet grass, going back in the house. I don't know how I got there. I don't know. I was a little kid. Someday I'll know. Because I'm going to ask God, what was that all about? In 1977, 1978, shortly after seeing Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Star Wars, opening my mind up to certain things, is what I talked about yesterday on being deceived. I had the doorway demon. I call it the doorway demon. That I couldn't see it from the torso down. It was like it was halfway in the reality and halfway not. But I know what I saw. And it was huge. If this is the door frame, it had to bend down to look at me. And all I can tell you is that my stepdad, at that time, my mom and he divorced after 9 years of marriage when I was younger. Turns out about 6 years ago, this was the guy that abused me. This is the guy that was mean to me. This is the guy that I couldn't tell my dad what happened because that guy would be in the ground. My dad would have been in prison. That guy committed suicide. And I believe I saw his demon when I was a young boy, within the first week of moving into that house with him. In 1988, we had a satanic cult that made national news around our area. They planned on doing a human sacrifice. That was the word on the street, or the country dirt roads. That they were going to take a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl and they were going to make sure that they did it right. That same satanic cult was stealing people's pets and sacrificing them in their collars that we found in the farmhouse. A group of me and my friends actually we didn't know what we were looking for, but we wanted to find the guys and do a little justice because we knew they were about our age. And we were all football players and we were going to do something. Wasn't the right thing to do, but we actually had to report it. We found the animal collars, we found the blood, we found the writings that they put on the walls. The house ended up getting blown up with dynamite. I don't know who did that. And that's not a joke. There were 25 officers across the road. If they had been over there near the house, some of them probably would have died. But the house did get lifted off its foundation and destroyed. In 1989, I started doing, and this is part of my presentation, it's not here. I have pictures of my artwork from 1989. I took 1 year of art in high school, and I had 2 portfolios by the time I was done, and most of my stuff was about spiritual warfare, and I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing. No idea. I wanted to make comic books. In 1992, I was driving around, I was home from college, and I was driving with 2 buddies, and both of their names were the same. It's kind of funny, first and last name. won't say their names because they don't want to be known about this stuff. They both own businesses, and they're actually afraid of man. But we saw something in the sky that there's no way it was humans. And I didn't test it. I quit reading my Bible about that time. And I started to believe it. They were aliens. Because there's no way that humans could go that fast and stop on a dime, or their brains would come out their ears, the way this thing performed. In 1993, I saw something else. This time it was a bright white orb with a red-green light going around it, about a quarter mile from my house above the trees. And I thought it was a crane. I thought it was somebody, because they were building a log cabin over near that area. And I thought it was a crane. They left some kind of light on. It was actually lighting up the trees below. I could see the color of green and the brown that was coming in September. The thing went across the sky, came back, and ended up shooting up. In 20 minutes of us watching this, ends up being, at the time I told my girlfriend, go and get my binoculars. I'm going to keep my eye on this thing, because when it took off and went up in the air, it looked just like a blinking star. It looked exactly like a star. Couldn't tell the difference between a blinking star and this one. By the time she got back out and looking at the binoculars, she said, I don't think you need to look at that, but you need to look over here, there's 10 of them. There's a whole cluster of them, and they were moving and doing patterns. Same thing over here. It went on for 20 minutes. I called the town cop. And at that time, I was just getting into radio. And the first thing the cop said was, dude, I wouldn't tell anybody about this. Or you won't have a job. You know it. He's right. So when that happened, and the police officer actually came out to my house and told me that they had been seeing things at night. They'd been getting phone calls. This is a small town just southeast of Lake Michigan's southern tip. In 1995, I was already living in California at that time. I'd moved away in 93-ish, 94, and I was on the 15 going up into the high desert. And I was with a guy named John that I worked with at the radio station. He was actually driving me home because I couldn't drive. I was hammered. Because at that time I was paid to be a partier, I was paid to be an entertainer, I was paid to do things that I'm not proud of today, but I'm glad I did them. Because it makes my testimony stronger and makes me realize how much more important it is to teach my children not to be who I was. In 1995, I had a strange experience. I experienced sleep paralysis. And the reason why I knew what sleep paralysis was that in 1988, going all the way back, where the satanic cult was in our area, one of my best friends, who was the co-captain of my football team, had sleep paralysis so bad that he thought he was going crazy because he was seeing what was on top of him. And that's what some people call it the shadow man. And it has an outline that looks like an alien gray, and they can come in many different sizes and shapes, according to all the reports that I've seen now. And nobody taught us how to protect ourselves. The church wouldn't touch it that I went to. The questions that we got back were, are you doing drugs? Because the guy that stood in the pulpit, high above everyone else, didn't have a clue. And it was easier for him to mock and scoff than to research it on his own. Tested and proven, right? In 1995, the sleep paralysis continued on to where in 1996, I ended up being, and I had full access to Universal Studios. My roommate was the head of TV development at Universal. I was the #1 night guy in Los Angeles. I did my own show, and then I did a show with Shaka Khan after that. So I was on the air 6 hours a night. And when I get off the air, my roommate was usually there, and we were gone. We were smoking pot. We were all over the place on the Universal Studios. We were making it a joke that we could go smoke pot in the best little whorehouse in Texas. We'd go smoke pot at Jurassic Park. We'd go smoke pot standing next to Mama or Mother in the Psycho House, which is nothing more than a barn, by the way. They keep lawnmowers in that thing. But we thought we were cool. Until we saw the Universal Studios, I say it was nothing more than a demon, but he thought it was the Phantom, like Scooby-Doo. It's a phantom. Like, no, dude, that's a demon. That's a demon. And we weren't protected that we knew of. But I truly believe that God has protected me, because there's several different things that could have happened. In In 1996, I read a book called The Mark of the New World Order by Terry L. Cook. And it changed a lot of my views on everything, from the way our money worked, and from the plans of the New World Order and what they want to do with depopulation. And I started to test those things. Didn't know why at the time, but God had me start testing. To where I was looking at barcodes. I started looking up the Federal Reserve. I started looking up the esoteric beginnings of certain factions of our government and why they name streets a certain way, why they name certain, I don't know, districts like Columbia. So when I started seeing the occultic ties to all this and what it was really truly based around, and I realized that it's not like I could take a step back. I think when we're not testing and proving things, or we're not testing things out, we get caught up in our life, this skin. And it's like, we think that we're actually taking a time out away from reality when we don't think about it. So we don't hear things clearly. But reality continues on. And it's what God made. And He's given us the tools to test everything that we experience while we're here. If we take the time and we want proof. So after I read that book, it wasn't a year later, I was in a party in the Hollywood Hills. Now mind you, Hollywood is, how many of you heard the term, it's all who you know? It's 99% who you know. Sometimes it's 100%. So I got invited to some of these crazy parties and I would not suggest anybody watch any of these movies, but one of the movies was Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. I'd been to a party like that. Didn't even know that party was going on in the house. I just happened to go down the hallway to find a bathroom. And there's a whole different type of party going on in this other room that was dark. And when I say dark, what I saw was dark. Didn't want any part of it. And I would highly suggest don't even let your imagination go down that road because it was filth. Not long after that, my co-host, Yvette Stevens, also known as Shaka Khan, we always had private parties at her houses on Sundays, and when a private party meant it was barbecue time. It's time to just kick back and relax, be who you want to be. And nobody's under a microscope at her house. You could sit down, we could have a meal, we could cook, kids could run around, could play in the pool. It was just laid back. And after 8 o'clock, the kids had to go home, and then it was time for us to break out the wine and hang out and turn on some Motown or turn on some music and stand around in a circle, and people would sing and just hang out, and nothing bad going on as far as I knew. Even to this day, I look back and I'm like, oh, really? It's the only time that we actually had normalcy. And I thank God for them. I thank God for the people that were in LA at the time for me, good and bad. But especially for Yvette and her camp, they treated me like gold, and I love them for that. But one night she basically told everybody to get out of the room. And we're in this big dining room, and she sat across from me, and she said, "Give me your hands." And I gave her my hands, and she looked at me and she said, "Get out of here. Get out of here." And I went to pull my hands back, and she squeezed my hands tighter. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Why are you kicking me out of your house? What I do?" She was like, "Man, I'm not talking about my house. I'm talking about LA. Get out of Hollywood, man. I'm seeing it changing. I remember you when I first met you to where you're at now, and I see the doors are opening. They're after you." And I said, "Who's after me?" She's like, "The system's demonic, man. Don't you know that yet? This is somebody who lived and breathed it her whole life from the time that she left Chicago." She told me to get out. So in 2000, that was 98, I ended up leaving LA. In 2000, I ended up getting, I ended up going to Myrtle Beach to do a morning show, syndicated morning show. So I loved golf. So I thought, why not? Let's change the pace. By the way, I wasn't testing anything. I wasn't doing anything but living my life for me and my career and trying to hold on to something. Meanwhile, I'm seeing men in the fog as I'm driving down the roads of South Carolina. all the time. I'd see these figures in the fog. I could see them with my headlights. It became normal to me. In 2001, we all remember 9/11. And when that hit, something sparked in my head when I watched those two towers. Before the first one fell, we were all in a conference room at a radio station. And I watched the second building's explosion happen. But I remember thinking to myself, it's going to tip over. And it's going to kill a bunch of people on the street. It's going to hit a bunch of other buildings, and I was thinking it's going to be like a domino effect, like buildings would actually do that. And when they came down on their footprint, I knew right then, I'm like, how'd that happen? But they came on TV and said, it's jet fuel. Didn't think anything of it until the first speech, where I heard our president say, we will not tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories. And I was sitting in my house and I went, why did he say that? Why would he say that? We will not tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories. What outrageous conspiracy theories is? What? I haven't heard anything. What's going on? So I started looking into what. I remember getting online. Who did 9/11? And they already knew. So I started testing. How could the buildings fall with jet fuel? And I started praying about it. By 2002, my dad had gotten sick. And I left right in the middle of the investigation on 9/11. And I was going deep because I was in Charlotte, North Carolina when it happened. And we went under martial law. It was never announced formally. But you couldn't go in downtown Charlotte near the banking district because as soon as 9/11 happened, the numbers from New York started running into Charlotte. And now that was the big camp. It's the second largest banking capital we have in the United States outside of Manhattan, or New York. And so as I was looking into this, all of a sudden my dad got sick. And I was 2 weeks away from starting to do a television show in Charlotte, North Carolina. And as my dad was dying, and he died of the same thing that Walter Payton had, it was bile duct cancer. He's not on any medication. He was just dying of fatigue. And about a week before he passed, he's laying in this hospital bed at my sister's house. And he starts telling me that he's seeing things that he can't explain. And he said, I think I'm seeing both sides. And it comes in and it comes out, but this is what they look like. And he described exactly what I saw as a 5-year-old kid. He described what my buddy in 1988 was seeing. He described what so many others were seeing. And at that point in time, I knew my dad's soul was in jeopardy. I said, you gotta pray, man. Because these things aren't out to test you. They're not here to test you. So my dad started testing Jesus. And he found him. So as that went on for about 2 weeks, 2 more days, my dad ended up getting baptized and proclaiming the blood. And it set him free. 13 hours later, he was gone. 10, 13 hours later, he was gone. And died peacefully. And he said he couldn't see those things anymore. They couldn't get near. They had to be further back. So as that happened, and my dad was telling me these things, all of a sudden I realized I missed a few tests. I missed quite a few tests. Sorry for the language, but I was pissed. And now I had to go out and prove it. I had to go prove that what's going on around us is not this little reality that we can step away from. But this is a reality that's happening around us, and these things are so real. The principalities and the wickedness that's out there in high places is so real that they have literally taken everything. They've even taken our own minds and twisted it because of the narrative we've been given our whole lives. Timothy's from China originally. Canada, but you know Chinese, right? Right before we started, he came up to me and said, I gotta show you this, man. And he showed me, come on, I think you should show people this. This is incredible. In the Bible, when it talks about earth, what is earth when the Bible's talking about earth? Does anybody know?
Land.
Dirt.
Yeah.
Dirt. Land, minerals.
Terra firma.
You know, so the language in Chinese, you won't be able to see the symbols, but basically the symbols come back, and if you type in earth, it's two symbols, correct?
Yeah. So if you type it in any translation app, like this is just Google Translate, so don't take any of my words for it. Just do it and test it and prove it. Yeah. Test everything and hold fast to what's good, right? Type in it in the translation, type in earth, translate it into Chinese, it will give you two symbols. One means earth, the other means ball. So when you talk about deceive, starting from the beginning, we've all been deceived. We've already been deceived, you know, in some point in our life. Right? So when you talk to, trying to reach out to people, to Chinese people, you think like, how come some countries are so difficult to reach out to? Well, in this sense, if we were to mention the topic of what we're talking about, imagine how hard it is, because they have been programmed in a sense that the earth is a dirt, it's a ground ball. So when you say flat earth, a flat ground ball would never make sense to them. But how come China is banning all the Bible? Because in the Bible, starting from Genesis, earth, you just simply translate it as ground. Or if you go to Bible Gateway, go to the bottom, and you guys can all test this out and see it for yourself. That either when the Bible mentioned about earth, since in Genesis, when God created heaven and earth, starting in verse 1 and continue on verse 2, you will say either ground or just big ground. The Bible never mentioned anything about ground ball. So one thing to keep in mind, I want to say, is just keep in mind of why we're being deceived, and that's the deception.
Yeah. Appreciate that. And that's just it. And the reason why, and this is crazy, you know, today, before I even was able to get my day started, I felt oppression. I felt something just, what is going on? Well, part of the reason maybe because I stay up too late. Nobody's doing that here, right? Did you ever get your car?
I did it.
Good.
30%.
I didn't do the rock. But what I can tell you is the crazy thing about this, the mind, body, and soul. They're after all of it. And we have to give it all to our Father. We have to lay it all at His feet, lay our body, lay everything at our feet for our Father and for our purpose. And I truly believe that our purpose here is to test and prove all things to be true. And use discernment and not be afraid of what someone else is going to say about you or to you. And so when all this started happening to me and I started looking back to the things I didn't test and the things I didn't prove, it made me realize one thing: I don't ever want to be that guy again. I don't want to let any man deceive me, let alone an agency, let alone a government, let alone a family member or anybody. Because I could deceive myself just as easy. But I knew as a kid, I knew what I was seeing across the water. It was in me. For whatever reason, God had me retain that incident, that when I heard this, I didn't laugh, and I didn't scoff, and I didn't mock. I'd already learned my lesson on 9/11. I already learned my lesson on past people in my lives that did things to me that I wouldn't have believed they could do. I look back at things I did to other people that I couldn't believe I did. I look back, why did I do that? Who's to learn? Doesn't mean I never do it again. So to close this, I know everybody's probably getting hungry. And I'll open up for questions if you guys want to ask questions. But what I can tell you is that when God shakes us, if we don't retain it, He'll shake you harder later. And if you don't test things to prove them to be true, you're going to be deceived. And get ready, because He will shake you later. And there are people that have been doing this a lot that haven't tested anything. While there's been others out there that haven't been doing this, but they've been doing this. And testing. And there's proof. And there's tons of proof. It's in the Word. But test the spirit behind it. And be careful. If you're not walking with Christ. If you're not walking with God. Because you will get shook hard. And it'll be humbling. So, on that note, I'll close with this. That in this war that we're in, there are no boundaries. It doesn't matter if you're a newborn or if you're taking your last breath. It doesn't matter if you're American, Canadian, or Chinese. It doesn't matter. You're made in His image. And He made an adversary. He says it Himself. God says it Himself in His Word. I made the evil. I made it. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but that's the truth. He made it. And it's all part of a design. It's all part of a plan. And the plan is, by the time you start testing things and proving things, what you're going to find out is that the one who is the truth, the one and only, is going to be the one that reveals to you and gives you all the proof. Because everything's ordained by Him, or it wouldn't happen. So as you look into this, and this isn't just about flat Earth, even though I use this because that is the most unbelievable thing that any of us have ever heard. But then once you see it and realize it, and you go out and you test it and look for the proof, it's right there. So don't be mean to people. Don't get mad at them if they don't listen to you. But like what Chad was saying earlier, just walk away. Plant the seed and go. It was awesome, by the way, man. Good job. So I'm honored to be up here in front of you guys, but I hope that what I shared with you today can help you. I hope that it gives you a better understanding of who I am and what I do. I still work in the entertainment industry. I'm working on some projects now. Been very active with Robbie. I'm helping with some of the conferences there, and with Steve and I will be still doing seed stuff. And I don't know. I'm still debating whether I want to put a YouTube channel together or not. I think my ministry's always been more, and I never even realized I had a ministry until somebody said it to me. It's like, dude, you're actually working in the ministry. You know that, right? Yeah, I guess I am. And I mean, yeah, it is. It's humbling. But one-on-one, I think, is the best way to go with people. You know, or like this. It's more intimate. It's, you know, it's tangible. And it's real. So, thank you. Any questions? Any questions?
What did you learn from the barcodes that you said you're testing?
What I learned was the patterns back then, and they've changed them up since then as well, but there was a pattern where they had a hidden 666 in them. I believe it was the first number, and then the last two sequences, the way that they were read, it gave a 6 and a 6 and a 6 at the end. So the market, people were saying that the mark of the beast is already embedded into everything we buy and sell, but not all barcodes are the same. Canada has, I think, a different system than we do now. That's the QB codes. So either way, we know this. I mean, if you believe the word, you're not going to be able to buy or sell anything if you're not part of the system. They're going to make it really hard on you, and you're going to need God. You're going to need God Almighty, and you're going to need protection. And the only way you can have protection is by having your armor on. You know, unless for whatever reason you can go out and do the things you used to do and not be sorrowful for it, and you haven't repented, and for whatever reason, God may keep that person around to bring them in later. Like I said, they may get a big shaking before they get woke up, but that's between you and God. So yeah.
And also, did you finish your testing 9/11?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What did you do?
Well, what I did was I actually went to New York, and I ended up looking at where the quote unquote hole was. And prior to going there, I called a couple of my friends that live there, obviously, and I said, well, when you saw these come down, because two of them had seen it, they were 13 blocks north, and the other one was 20 blocks north. But they could see the smoke and everything, and someone was coming their way. What they said was that some of their friends ended up having the dust in their house. And the smell that they smelled, they could smell, you know, it wasn't like it was a fire smell. It was more of a dust. Which, how many of you know of the work of Dr. Judy Wood? You know the term dustification. Because how do you get two 110-story buildings to fall down on their own footprint, and the sub-level one is still intact? It didn't fall into the ground. They couldn't fall.
Energy weapons.
Boom! Thanks, Jared. So yeah.
Directed energy weapons.
Yeah. Look up Dr. Judy Wood. Where did the towers go?
I was just gonna say.
She breaks it down very simple, right?
Yes, yes.
So
Very
yeah.
good, very good.
Yeah.
That's where it all
And
material
it's the same thing that's going on in California right now in certain aspects.
Yep, the fires.
Yep. And probably Canada. I know Canada, Robbie said that Canada is so bad right now. It was worse than when we were there for the conference 2 weeks ago.
Separate, in Greece.
Yeah. It's scalar weaponry. It's exactly what Nikola Tesla was already. You guys remember Nikola Tesla? You know the name, right?
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with him, look him up. But Nikola Tesla had a contract with J.P. Morgan. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me, but this is what I'm going by from memory from like 10 years ago researching this. J.P. Morgan ended up visiting a site where Nikola Tesla was in Oklahoma. And when he looked at what he was building, he was like, what is this? What is this thing? It was they call it the Tesla coil of Oklahoma, the Oklahoma coil. And he said, oh, I got an idea for free energy for everybody. I'm going to bring free energy and pull electricity right out of the air. And we can give free energy. JP Morgan said, all right, well, I'll handle this. You go on back to New York. And they ripped the thing down. They pretty much ripped the guy off. And Nikola Tesla went from being the man at the World's Fairs and everything and the who's who of science to basically being ousted by the society, the higher ups or the elite, or if you want to call them the establishment. So, I mean, this is to be expected. If you're reading the scriptures with a truly humble heart and open mind for the word to speak to you, God will speak to you. The video that I showed earlier that Mike played for you, that was the most humbling thing that ever happened to me. I mean, I had no idea that was going to happen. I just basically got hung up on by one of my best buds in this truth movement as far as really wanting to know answers. To where I thought, okay, I probably won't talk to him for a couple of weeks. All right, go get your stuff. To lightning strike in front of my house because I was reading my homework from 1984. And you can't write this stuff. Just like I said, you can't write it. It's already written. But know who you serve, and know that there's one that's coming after you at any chance that he gets. Go ahead, Baxter.
Can I say something quick?
Yeah.
And you asked me what the shooting there, what I thought. And Steve was in the chat.
What's that?
You asked me.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say something really quick.
Yeah.
Because this is my side.
Yeah.
Okay, so he asked me about shape of the earth, and I didn't laugh at him because I was already geocentric on planets for 5 years or so. So when he asked me, I was like, I don't know, man. Like, go ask God. Hold the fleece. Go ask God. He'll tell you. He'll just tell you. That's it. Just ask him. He'll tell you. Or number two, go read his word. He'll tell you. Oh, he did it. Or number three, observe, test, and demonstrate. And you guys did all three. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. And that's all. And we're going to keep doing it.
And lightning struck.
Lightning did strike. I mean,
And I tell my buddy to go ask God. I believe it. And it happened. And I went, oh man, you know?
yeah. Wow. It's humbling, man. I mean, I can't joke about it. I mean, I'd like to be able to have some kind of joke about it, but it's not funny. It's not funny. It's an answer. And I asked for an answer, and I got it.
Joe, can you send the lightning?
That's it, man. So, and I know Satan falls like lightning from the heights. Guess what? There was no devil standing in my front yard after that happened. Okay? So, it was the devil I was testing. God gave me the answer. Yeah, you've been lied to. Just like in the Chinese Bible, you've been lied to.
So what do you think the lights in the sky were? What do you think that was all about?
Angels. I truly believe that's what they are. And I didn't go into this, but just in the last month after I went to Holland to do the laser test across Lake Isle. We shot a laser across Lake Isle, 25.4 miles. And I actually helped set the mount up, drove an hour and 10 minutes across the lake, and at 25.4 miles across, I could see the blue laser. I could see the middle, because the laser will culminate, it gets wider as you go, especially that size laser. You can't. No laser is going to be a fine laser coming across all the way. It just doesn't work. But that wasn't good enough for people. It wasn't good enough for us either, because we know that lasers can kind of go up, lasers can go down. Moisture it's like a prism. It is what it is. Over time, it can bounce around. You go left, go right, go up, down, up. It can happen. Depends on the weather. But microwaves don't do that. They're line of sight. So stay tuned on that one with FE Core, because that's what we're doing next. And when we hit 140 plus miles with a microwave at 10 feet off the water, there's no denying it. And if you keep denying that way, God's going to give you what you want. He's going to give you your idol. And you want NASA's narrative at that point. You don't want his words. You don't want the eyes and ears that work to be the authority that God turns on that switch. It's Proverbs 20:12. The hearing ear and the seeing eye of the Lord have made him both of them. Put it in the video for you, because I know that's what he did. So one day my eyes didn't work. My ears didn't work. I was all about the world. But when I look back at my life, when I look back at this, and I had to take these notes down today, I'm like, man, there's some crazy stuff that's happened to me. But you know what's really funny? I bet you money if everybody sat down and did the same thing I did by putting it down on a piece of paper, going back in the memories, writing them down, you'd have a lot more things that you could actually look at and go, whoa, how come I haven't talked to people about this? And I think this is the time where we have to do it. This is the time where you share the stories and you give each other confirmation, because you find comfort in it.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
You only get three things for a quarter, though.
Yeah,
Three for a quarter.
we were attacked, right?
Yes.
By some of the people within Nephilim, community and stuff like that. And I tried to contact the aliens too. And I heard a voice.
I didn't try contact.
I tried to contact them.
Did you build the ET thing with
I-
the umbrella?
No, I literally I believed in God at that point, but not Jesus. And I literally tried to contact him. And I heard that voice, and it sounded like rolling thunder over cool water, so it was not some water. It was powerful, but yet calm. Yeah, voice. And we were attacked by somebody, a pastor. Attacked by a pastor. And he said, lightning, this and that, with the light side and the wonders. So I went with you. Remember I called you because I was in
Yeah.
And I called him and I'm like, okay, now, so I went through the scriptures about lightning. It's all God. Even his voice is like lightning. That's what kicks him out, right?
Yeah.
Even his voice is like lightning. And then I got to that verse that his voice is like thunder over the waters. Because he's above the dome. You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. All right, that's it. Any more questions? I know everybody's wanting to get to there. Go ahead.
My bad.
No, it's all good.
Real quick, as far as when you said that you were looking into like streets and names and all that,
Yeah.
what did you actually look into to get, like,
Like the ley lines?
say that again?
Ley lines? Okay, if you look from the aerial view of Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
you see all that. Yeah, so I was looking at the streets and how they are designed, and why did they do that there? Why did they move the capitals, and why? Why did they do that? Why did they move it down there? And why do they tend to, some cities have circles, some have straight lines, this and that? What is the purpose and all that? None of this, when they build stuff, I don't believe any of it's by accident. And I truly believe this, that our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, was tempted in the desert by our adversary. And he didn't take the bait. But there's nothing new under the sun, because Satan was made to do what he does until the last time that he can do it. And he's doing the same thing. And just because Jesus didn't take the bait doesn't mean that others haven't. Just because Jesus didn't take the bait doesn't mean that somebody else won't. And just like we're supposed to be fishermen of men, the devil's got a bigger boat. He's cruising, and he's trolling, and he's picking up every single one that he can. And he's got his flanks out on both sides. And he's chumming right along. So the world's always hungry for something. And it's still from Paul Washer. He said this one time in one of his sermons, and some people don't like Paul. I think he's great. But he said, everybody wants to get to heaven. They just don't want God to be there when they get there. Try and make him out to be who we want him to be. And that's dangerous because he'll let you think you're right. That's just it. Test and prove it. Test and prove it. So there you go. So, I think we're going to dinner now.
Yep. Oh, dinner.
Run, get in line now.